All right, the section of your notes is going to be section 3.14, opposite of opposite integers. Section 3.14, opposite of opposite integers. So we know that the opposite means when two numbers that are the same distance from zero. So the opposite occurs when there are two numbers that are the same distance from zero. Okay? So we've been looking at number lines and integers, and we know that all number lines start at 0. All right, and then if you're looking at the number line 5, 10, go down by -5, -10. If we're looking at the integer 10, okay, we plot that, but the opposite of 10 is what? Well, -10. We know the opposite of 10 is -10 because it is the same distance from 0. Same distance from 0. Okay? But note this. This is important. This is important on the note. The opposite, and you can abbreviate OPP, the opposite of 12 is written like this. The opposite of the integer 12 is -12. The opposite of the integer 12 is -12. And then the same goes for this. The opposite of the opposite of the opposite of 8 is written like this. The opposite of the integer 8 is 8. And you know, when we see something like this on the number line, and we'll just go up by, let's say 4, 8, 12, -4, -8, -12. All right, when we see this number right here, we see negative, or the opposite of the integer 8. All right, we start by plotting 8. So we know 8 is right there, okay? So we just plotted that, so we put a check mark. And then the opposite of 8 is -8. So we draw an arrow, we put a check because we just checked off that one. And our last one, the opposite of that, we go back to 8. And where we left off, your answer is 8. So the opposite of the integer 8 is 8. That's it. So there are 3 simple steps to find the opposite of the opposite. All right, 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to plot integer on number line and add a check. So we'll be adding our checks today for each time that you complete something. Secondly, our second step is to draw arrows for each negative or opposite sign. And then, of course, add a check, just like what we did right up here. And lastly, that third step is select final integer. That's it. Select your final integer. So plot integer on number line, add a check, draw your arrows for each opposite or negative sign, add your check, select final integer. That's it. So let's see what this looks like. So number 1 is going to be the opposite of the integer -21. All right, so just skip 2 lines down so you have enough room for your arrows. All right, so step 1 just says to plot your integer. So we start with 0. and we'll go up by 7, 14, 21, negative 7, negative 14, negative 21. All right. So step 1 just says plot your integer on your number line. So we plot negative 21. We know that's to the left. So go ahead and plot that. And then put a check next to that step you just completed. Secondly is draw arrows for each negative sign. So here's a negative out in front of our already plotted. So we just go to the opposite of 21, which is a positive 21, and put a check. Since we only did one jump, our answer is 21. That's it. That's it. Let's try another one. Number 2 is the opposite of the opposite of the negative 55. All right, so start by, just skip 2 lines that we have enough room, and we know that all number lines start at 0. And then we'll go up by 11. So 11, 22, 33, 44, 55. All right, and then negative 11, negative 21, negative 33, negative 44, negative 55. All right, so step 1, plot integer on number line. We know our integer is negative 55, so we go to the left and plot it. Put a check because you just plotted it. Now draw arrows for each negative sign. So we know here's an opposite or a negative sign, so we go to the opposite. That's once. And then we still have one more, so we'll just follow that arrow all the way back to negative 55. So your answer is negative 55. Negative 55 is your answer. That's it. That's it. Let's try another one. Number 3 is the opposite of the opposite of the integer 60. The opposite of the opposite of the integer 60. So we always start by drawing our number lines, and we know all number lines start at 0. All right, so we place a 0, and this would be easy to get to by tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Negative 10, negative 20, negative 30, negative 40, negative 50, negative 60. Okay? So we have our number line. Looks really good. Now, plot the integer on the number line. So your integer is 60. 60 is to the right. 60 units. And then put a check because you just plotted that. Step 2 is draw arrows for each negative sign you see. Here's one sign, so we'll go to the opposite 60. All right, and then put a check. And then we also have another opposite sign or negative sign, so we draw the arrow and go right back to your 60. So your answer is a positive 60. Positive 60 is your answer. That's it. Let's try another one. This one is your opposite of the opposite of the opposite of the integer negative 125. So we have the opposite of the opposite of the opposite of the integer negative 25. So just skip a couple lines, draw your number line. All number lines start at 0, and this would be easy to get to by 25. 25, 50, 75, 100, 125. Negative 25, negative 50, negative 75, negative 100, negative 125. Okay? So we start by plotting your integer. So plot your integer. We know negative 125 is to the left, 125 units. All right, and then just add a check. All right, we just did that, so we add a check. Now we have another negative sign out front, so draw your arrow to positive 125, put a check. Here's another opposite, so draw an arrow and then put another check. And we have one more, so we draw our last arrow to that 125, so your answer is a positive 125. It's right where you left off. That's it. That's it. Go ahead and try numbers 5, 6, and 7 on your own. Number 5 is, let's see here. Number 5 is the opposite of the integer negative 48. Okay, number 6 is the opposite of the integer 37. And number 7 is the opposite of the integer negative 204. Many opposites there. So go ahead and try numbers 5, 6, and 7 on your own.